So it is July in Arizona and it's 115 degrees every day. Now a smart person would get into the air conditioning and hide out from the heat. But what I'm gonna do is show you how to upgrade the brakes on an 04 GTO to the 05, 06 stuff on this episode of Josh's Car Corner. So some of you out there might be asking, what exactly am I doing? And this is where a little knowledge of the history of the Monaro comes in handy. See, the 2004 GTOs are built on what's called the VX platform, and it is a different platform to the 2005 and 6 GTOs. Even though the cars look exactly the same and the chassis are pretty much identical, the platforms, at least in Australia, are recognized differently. The VX platform covered all Monaros produced in Australia from 2001 to 2005, and there were 3 different series, 1, 2, and 3. 2004 GTOs got built on the VX Series 3 platform, and 2005 and 6 GTOs got built on what's called the VZ platform. And the differences are that the brakes on the VZ platform are bigger. It goes from a 12-inch front rotor to a 12.6-inch front rotor, and in the back, the rear rotors get upgraded to vented rotors, where in the 2004 GTO, the rear rotors are not vented. So the brakes are bigger and better, and the reason you would want to upgrade them is it's just as easy to get a ton of power out of one of the LS1 power GTOs as it is out of one of the LS2 power GTOs. And once you start making more power, that smaller brake system becomes a liability, and you really want to have more braking power. Fortunately, all the 05, 06 stuff is a direct bolt-on to the 04 car. All you have to do is get your hands on the parts. And what we're going to be doing on my buddy Chip's car today is upgrading to the 05, 06 brake calipers, and we're also going to put in rotors for an 05, 06, but we're also going to go with the top shelf brake components, the best rotors you can possibly get for the GTO from DBA. We're also going to be putting in some performance race brake fluid. We're going to be putting in the best street pads they can get from Hawk, and he's going to have a much better braking system when all is said and done. So once he gets here, we'll get the car up on jack stands, and I'll show you the process of going through replacing the calipers, replacing the rotors, and also how to properly bleed the brake system out, because we're going to use my power bleeder, and I'm going to show you the correct procedure for taking the brakes apart, putting it all back together, and getting it bled out properly. Okay, so what we're going to do before we get the brakes put on, Chip is going to drive by here with his factory brake set up at 70 miles an hour, and he's going to slam on the brakes. We're going to see how long it takes him to stop, and once we put the big brakes on, we're going to come back, do the test again, and see just how much of an improvement we achieved. We got Chip's car up in the air, but before we do anything, we need to make sure that all of the bleeder valves on our new brakes will back off, because if you get one on there and you can't get a brake bleeder open, you've got problems. Now, these are soft, typically brass fittings. Don't just go putting some 12-point socket or 12-point wrench on there, because you don't want to round them off. That's a bad day too. Use the proper tool to break them loose. Either get a 6-point socket if you have it, or if you have them, line wrenches to get on there and break it off. And once it's loose, then you can use something a little smaller and a little easier to work with. But make sure before you touch anything, you can break all these loose. Now, it's not so important on the ones on the car because we're taking them off, but the ones we're putting on, we definitely want to make sure that we can move them. Okay, now that we know that all of our brake bleeders open on our new calipers, we can go ahead and start taking apart the old brakes. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is take off the brake line. And when you're doing brakes, you always want to start with the caliper that's farthest away from the master cylinder and work your way forward. So because our master cylinder's on the driver's side in this car, we want to start at the right rear. Then we're going to go to the left rear and do that one. Then we're going to go to the right front, and then we're going to finish up with the left front. So I'll get this line taken off. Now, to stop the brake line when you take it off from making such a mess, I just go into the hardware store and get these little rubber stoppers, shove those in where the bolt goes, and it won't necessarily stop the leaking, but it'll slow it down so you don't make such a mess. And make sure your parking brake is off too when you do the rear setup, or you're not going to be able to get the rotor off because the parking brake pads will be pushing out on the rotor and you won't be able to get it off. So make sure your parking brake is off when you get started too.
Watch your fingers.
Okay, so I got my little stopper in there now, so it's not leaking anymore. And then when I want to get it out, I just push it back the other direction because it's beveled, so it's easy to push back out. Now it's two 15mm nuts that hold the slider bolts on. Take those off first, take your caliper off, and then it's two 19mm bolts for the bracket to get that off. Okay, so I just learned something that I was not aware of. We got his factory calipers and brackets off, and then I started looking at them compared to the 0506 calipers and brackets, and on the rear, they're exactly the same. It is the same part number on the caliper, and it's the exact same part number on the bracket, and we even measured the gap for where the rotor fits in there, and it's the same 7/8 of an inch. So the rear setup is exactly the same. The only difference is the 0506 has a vented rear rotor. Can you see the venting in there? This is his factory 04 rotor, no venting. So that has no way to cool other than air just touching the surface of the rotor. At least with this, you can get air up in the channel and you can cool off the rotors a lot better. So it's still worthwhile to upgrade to these rotors, but you can reuse your calipers and brackets, save a little bit of money. That's exactly what we're gonna do here. Now, if you were doing this upgrade on a completely factory setup too, this would be a good time to also upgrade the brake lines from the factory rubber stuff. Now, Chip's already done that. He's got the Russell braided stainless lines in here. Now in the back, you've got the line here that attaches to the hub. There's another one on the inside that goes between the semi-trailing arm and the frame of the car itself that you would also change. Now, if you were doing that, what you would do is you would start with the inner one and then have everything disconnected, hook that one up to the hard line going down the semi-trailing arm, allow that whole thing to fill up with fluid again, start dripping. Then you would put the back one on, let that fill up with fluid and start dripping. And also make sure every one of these bolts that holds a brake line on has got these banjo washers on them. They're made of brass. That's your gasket to seal everything up. Don't lose these. You need these in order to seal everything back up. Okay, one other thing to do before putting the caliper back on, while you're back here, it's a good opportunity to take these sliders out and repack these chambers in here with fresh grease so they'll slide. Because what happens is this is what's called a sliding caliper. It moves back and forth and gets itself centered, so when the brake pads compress, the whole thing actually moves back and forth on these sliders. If these ever get dried out and frozen up, what's going to happen is only one brake pad is going to be working on the rotor, and that'll just cause warpage and shorten the life of everything back there. So you want to make sure these are greased. The best grease I've found, you get this at Napa, it's called Sil-Glide. It's a yellow grease compound. Works great for this stuff. Stays in there, lasts a long time, and it's pretty cheap too. I think these tubes are only like 10 bucks. So make sure you get these repacked with grease before you put your caliper back on. Okay, I got the caliper slides all greased up and put back in there. Also, make sure you spray the hell out of your rotor surface with brake cleaner. Wipe it down with a paper towel. Make sure it's clean. Never touch it. Don't leave fingerprints. You want that as clean as possible so your bed-in procedure for your brakes will go well. Now it's time for torque specs. So the bracket bolts to go into the hub, that is 63 foot-pounds. These sliders right here for the caliper, those little bolts get 24 foot-pounds, and then when you put the line back on for the brake line and to put that bolt in, that is 26 foot-pounds. So I'm going to put the caliper back on with the brand new HP Plus rear pads, get this all torqued up. But when I put the caliper on, I'm going to leave the bleeder cracked open a full turn. So as I'm putting this on and it's leaking, it's also going to be filling the caliper back up with fluid, and it'll push most of that air out. So when it comes time to bleed, we've got most of the air out, and the bleeding procedure will take a lot less time. Okay, well, I finally got the inner and outer lines on the right rear corner replaced. I'll show that in a second, but I just wanted to show this. So, see down there, that line right there, coming off the master cylinder, or the reservoir? That is going to the clutch line. Now, that didn't have that clamp on it, and the way I just found that out is I started pumping this thing up, and I got to about 15 pounds, and that just blew off and sprayed brake fluid all over the place. So I managed to find that clamp, put it on there. Now it holds pressure, and now I can go around and bleed the right rear brake corner. So I'm just going to crack this bleeder here, see what starts coming out. All right, see the old fluid, see the air? That's all going to be from when I change the inner line. There's going to be a lot of air in there. And this thing will start filling. And what I'm looking for is for that fluid to change from that murky brown sludge we got going to something nice and clear. And once it's nice and clear and there's no more bubbles, I know I'm good. So let's sit here and watch this fill. Well, I filled this thing up once, and now I'm filling it up again. But look how much cleaner the fluid is now as it compared to before. And what I noticed too is I was seeing little particles of rust traveling along the very bottom of the hose as the old fluid was coming out. So there was definitely a little bit of rust in those hard lines too. And that was clearing up. So I think if I fill this, once I fill this thing up one more time, I think this is going to be pretty good, and this corner is going to be done. Okay, we got the back brakes all put together. Now it's time to work on the fronts, and there are some differences here. For example, the caliper slider bolts went from being a 15 millimeter in the back, now they're 12 millimeter up here. It's still an 18 right here to hold it so you can get the bolts out. And the brake line up here is different on the 04 versus the 0506. And because Chip has got these Russell braided stainless lines, we might not be able to make it work. But if that is the case, we do have some factory ones we'll throw on there for the time being, just so we can make everything work today. Okay, we're working on putting the new 05 brakes on the front here, and there are two things I figured out. Well, one, the caliper slide bolts on the newer 05 brakes are 15 millimeter, just like the rears are. And two, the bolts that hold the 04 brackets on are smaller than the 05 brackets. So when Chip bought these, he also got with these bushings. Then they slide into the holes here on the caliper bracket so you can use the smaller bolts and everything still lines up. So easiest way I found to do it, take the bolt, put the bushing on there and set it on top, and then get a mallet and just hold it steady like this and just pound it home. Like that, and then it's in there. Now you can use the smaller bolts, and we're going to put the rest of this back together. Okay, we're working on the last corner of the car right now, and there's one thing I got to mention that we found out on the right front corner of the car is that with the bigger brake bracket, it interferes with this brake dust shield right here, and it's hitting right here. And we put it all together over there, and we figured out, and we couldn't turn the wheel, and we couldn't figure out why until we realized we were pinching this shield. So we got to cut it off. We got it marked right here. We're just going to cut it with a cutoff wheel, and that'll give you clearance for the bracket, because this larger bracket, if you look, just gets all kinds of in there, and yeah, it'll just stop the rotor dead. So we got to cut that off. Okay, we've got this final corner together, and now I need to give you the torque specs for the front. So the caliper slider bolts are the same as the back. They are 24 foot-pounds, and the brake line is also going to be 26 foot-pounds, just like the rear. The difference is these bracket bolts. Now, don't ask me why, but the service manual is saying 52 foot-pounds plus 90 degrees. And if you can get 90 degrees on these bolts, you are a mightier man than I. The best I could get is 45. And honestly, that's enough. If it's 63 back there, you shouldn't need more than 100 here. And if you get to 45 degrees, you're well over 100. So we're gonna get this buttoned up, bleed this last corner, and we're gonna get it on the ground. We'll do the break-in process after that, pardon the pun. And yeah, this thing will be ready to go. Okay, well, I'm back here with Chip's car again. He's had these brakes on the car for a couple of months now, had a chance to get them nice and bedded in. So we're gonna run that same brake test again we ran at the start of the show, and we're gonna see just how much shorter this thing pulls up from 70 miles an hour compared to the original brakes. this, you stopped in like, what, 217 or 220 feet or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
This time you stopped in 175 feet. 40 feet better, 45 feet better. So I'd say that was totally worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It felt good too.
Absolutely, and we smelled it too.
Yeah.
You knew those brakes were working. So there you go. If you've got an 04 and you want it to stop better, that is the cheapest and easiest upgrade you can do. Get the 05 brakes. Now, if you want to use the 04 knuckle, you just get the sleeves from Rob at Wretched Motorsports, so you can use the 04 bolts, or you can change the knuckles out to the 05s and do it that too. You got to cut that brake dust shield back a little bit to make it fit. But other than that, it is a simple bolt-on operation, and you can save yourself a lot of stopping distance with that quick little upgrade. So hope this has inspired you to do the same thing if you have an 04. And once again, thanks for watching Josh's Car Corner. We'll see you guys next time. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed that episode about upgrading the brakes on an 04. I want to do a little postscript here. Number one, if you want to do that upgrade on your own car and you need the brake calipers and the setup to do the conversion, the guy I know who has all the parts has about 24 0506 complete brake setups. You can do just the fronts, you can do all four, comes with all the brackets, the bolts, the factory lines, everything for $250 for a complete set plus shipping. If you just want to do the fronts, that's $150 plus shipping. Save yourself a little money. But here's the email address on the bottom of the screen. If you want a set, get in touch with me and I'll hook you up. Also wanted to say that I have abandoned Instagram. I think I said that once before, but I have got a Facebook page for the channel. If you go to the main channel page and look in the lower right, the Facebook icon, it should take you right to it. Josh's Car Corner, same name. I'm going to start doing some things with that. I'm going to start trying to put content up there on a regular basis. I think I'm going to start doing some poll questions. I might start doing user-submitted videos, just things to make the community a little more active and let everybody know what everybody else is up to. Who knows where it'll go, but I'm done with Instagram, so if you want to keep up with what's going on with the show, every time I post an update or a new episode, you'll find it there first. So check that out if you want to keep up with the show. Thanks a lot. See you later.